If you were there, you live in North America near the end of the Ice Age about 10,000 years ago. For weeks, your hunter gatherer group has been following a herd of elk across a marshy landscape. This trip has taken you far from your usual hunting grounds. The air is warmer here, there are thick grasses and bushes full of berries. You decide to camp here for the summer and perhaps settle down. How would staying here change your way of life? You have to consider the land and the climate, the dwellings that you live in, the clothes that you wear, the foods that you eat. You must also consider the available resources: water, game and wild plants, and building materials. Today we are going to be examining what were called Paleo Indians. That is the very first Americans, the first people to migrate to the Americas from Asia sometime prior to 12,000 years ago, and megafauna, the animals that these people followed in their migrations and hunted, who traveled back and forth between Asia and North America on what was called the Bering Land Bridge. North America during the last ice age, more than 12,000 years ago, people began traveling to North America, and the route that they took to get here came from Asia and crossed what was called the Bering Land Bridge, or here it looks like the Bering Sea, but at one time there was so much water locked up in ice that Alaska and Asia were connected to each other. These first people in the Americas traveled across the land bridge from Siberia to Alaska. And they spread throughout what are now Canada, the United States, Mexico, and all of South America. Paleo Indians are the first people to inhabit the Americas. Those first people to inhabit California were hunters and gatherers who lived at the end of the last ice age. Paleo Indian camps were typically small ones, consisting of bands or groups of 20 to 50 people of both sexes and all ages. Band organization was egalitarian. That means that there were no formal leaders, there was no social status or classes. They all depended upon each other completely for survival. This picture is a picture of a kill site. Paleo Indians would hunt, kill, butcher, and cook their food on site, in this case a mastodon. And this again is an example of a kill site. Because they preserve well today, we find bones, projectile points, and other stone tools, as well as charcoal, as evidence that prehistoric peoples inhabited a site. Artifacts such as leather, fur, grass, and other foods don't preserve well and are not often found. Here we have an example of a hunting spear. One of the most distinctive tools was the Clovis projectile point, which you can see here, a large flint point that was meant to hunt large animals. This particular spear is one with a detachable shaft. That is, you have a long stabbing shaft, one that you can thrust into the animal, and then the top part actually detaches so that when the hunter pulls the hunting shaft back, it leaves the stone point embedded in the animal's body. This fluted point was hafted or tied to a wood harpoon-like lance, which were thrown in close proximity to the animal, either thrown or stabbed into them directly. Once the point was embedded in the animal, it would come loose from the spear shaft, allowing the point to be reused. Here we have a toolkit. California's earliest inhabitants used a distinctive toolkit that was well adapted for the hunting and processing of big game animals. Toolkits included a variety of stone, bone, and antler implements. The kit was then carried around in a small purse-like pouch. And here we have examples of various tools. Number one is an antler awl that was used to make hide clothing. An awl would be used for doing things like punching holes and processing animal skins to be used to wear. Number two is a bone needle. It's a sewing needle used to sew hide for shoes and clothing. Number three is a hammerstone that is used to make stone tools, such as what we see with number four. These are chert knives that were used to process meat. Chert is a kind of volcanic glass. It can be sharpened to a very, very fine edge, very sharp. So it's good for cutting meat and stripping meat off of skins. You have number five, scrapers that are used to clean hides, which are usually made of flint. And then the fluted projectile points, number six, that were used for hunting. These various projectile points, most of them quite large, were meant for hunting large game. The megafauna themselves. Paleo Indians hunted large mammals that we collectively call megafauna, most of which are now extinct. The animal that you see in the picture here, this is a giant Irish elk. They followed herds of these big game animals from place to place, hunting in groups. And because of the danger, men hunted while women raised children and gathered wild plant foods like nuts and berries. Here we have an example of a large predator, the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon fatalis, stood about 4 feet tall, lived between 1.5 million and as late as 10,000 years ago. And here we have the animal compared to a full-grown human male. Look at the size of these teeth. These are stabbing teeth. The saber-toothed cat's jaw, the lower jaw, is actually fully hinged. It can expand far beyond what the mouths of most other animals can today, so that it can use those huge canine teeth to actually stab animals by thrusting their head deep into the neck, usually, or back of the animal, causing deep wounds that will cause the creature to bleed to death. Pretty terrifying looking predator. Here we have the short-faced bear, which was very long-legged. Scientific name Arctoda which was 5 feet 5 at the shoulder, lived between 800,000 and 10,000 years ago. A large and dangerous predator, if ever there was one. The dire wolf, Canis dirus, which was native to California, 5 feet in length or greater, very tall at the shoulder. If you look at the size of this wolf compared to a 6 foot tall male, you can tell this was a very, very large animal, living between 1 million years ago and 10,000 years ago. The giant ground sloth, Ermotherium laurelardi, stood 20 feet tall, lived between 8 million years ago and 10,000 years ago, also native to California. Originally, they evolved in South America, but after South America and North America were connected at the Isthmus of Panama, these creatures migrated northward and made California a home. Look at the size of that thing compared to a full-grown male there in the lower left-hand corner. We have the North American bison, or Bison antiquus. The photograph here is not of the actual giant North American bison. These creatures were truly huge, easily twice the size of a modern North American buffalo, standing fully 7 feet tall at the shoulder, lived between 40,000 and 10,000 years ago. The American mastodon, the Mammut americanum, stood 9 feet tall at the shoulder, lived between 15 million years ago and 10,000 years ago. Mastodons were native to other parts of North America, not so much California that I know of, although we did have native elephants here in California as well, such as the mammoth. Woolly mammoth's not in California. Again, this would have been much further north. Stood 9 feet tall at the shoulder, lived between 90,000 and 10,000 years ago. Now, this is one that you would have found here in California, actually here in the San Joaquin Valley. And this is the imperial mammoth, Mammutus imperator. Stood 16 feet tall at the shoulder, lived between 4.9 million to right around 11,000 years ago. There was even a pygmy variety of the imperial mammoth that lived on Catalina Island that was less than half the size of its mainland cousin. As the Paleo-Indians spread out in the Americas, they eventually ranged out and lived basically everywhere. They even pushed further south of Mesoamerica into Central America, eventually into South America, into the Caribbean Sea. By around 10,000 years ago, the climate went through another great change. And because the climate changed drastically, the megafauna that these original immigrants to the Americas survived on, the megafauna went extinct, all of them. All of the mammoths, the mastodons, the giant sloths, the dire wolves, the giant elk, the saber-toothed cats, they all went extinct sometime around between 11 and 10,000 years ago. And these Paleo-Indians, these ancient Native Americans, had to learn new ways of subsistence that would ultimately include the development of agriculture, along with hunting, much smaller prey, and gathering wild foods as well. So where did these first Americans come from? Most historians believe that humans began coming to North America from Asia during the Pleistocene epoch, or the last ice age. So what else do we know about these people? When did the first people arrive in America? How did they get here? What were they following? What kind of tool making did they carry out? And what were their food sources?